right, everybody, welcome to Fantasy Daily. Now with a little bit of intro music. I put together a little something earlier on. I'll clean that up later, but it's just something for me to get a little bit of intro music in here, up my production value, and maybe even up this production and audio value. Hopefully you can tell, because I can definitely tell. I got some new recording equipment. It's actually just my phone, but I upgraded my phone, and actually that leads into the fact that, Nate, you haven't been here in over a week. I know some of you guys have reached out to me in person and been like, hey man, I'm looking for a new Fantasy Daily episode. I'm looking at Spotify, I'm checking YouTube, I don't see you. I'm checking the Facebook, I don't see you. Where you at? I need it. It's free agency time. Where are you? We need you. What's going on? Well, everybody, be afraid, be not afraid. I am back. I am ready to go. This whole last week has been kind of crazy. Last Wednesday, I made my last episode, so it's been 8 days, because you probably listen to this Thursday morning. 8 days ago was my last episode. I said on the end of that episode that I'm probably going to edit that video for YouTube, and then I'll give you guys another one on Friday. Well, life got in the way. I went away for the weekend with my girlfriend, so Friday I didn't get a chance to get on to do an episode, and I also didn't get a chance to edit my video for the YouTube. So if you're a YouTube watcher, first of all, thank you. Like and subscribe if you can, please. But if you really want the best way to get to the show, it's going to be on Spotify. I've said this before on other shows, but if you're a new member, first of all, welcome to Fantasy Daily. Thank you for joining us. And also, the best way to listen to the show is definitely on Spotify, because that's where I upload immediately after recording, whereas the video on YouTube takes a little while to upload, and if I'm going to edit the video, then it's going to take even longer. So if you want immediate access to the stuff, to be super current on everything, then you're probably going to want to subscribe to the podcast and set on notifications for that. That way, as soon as I post an episode, you guys will get it. It's usually the morning of that you'll get the notification, or when it finally uploads. It's usually in the morning, because I do a lot of these after work at night. As you can see now, I'm doing this Wednesday night about 8 o'clock. So most of you guys will get this around 9:30 or so. So anyway, I'm back. Sorry for the delay. It's been a wild week. I've been keeping up with everything. I did get a new phone, and with me getting a new phone, I lost all of my notification settings on this phone. So there was like a 4-day window where I wasn't getting any of the notifications that I really rely on for doing everything that we do throughout, time. I keep those notifications on my phone so I can go on later and write down everything that's important, because I can't retain everything, obviously. So I lost that. It took me a little while to get it back. Fortunately, my notifications are coming in right now, except for some Chase Claypool news that somebody just messaged me about, and I don't even know what's going on with Chase Claypool, so that'll be for maybe later on show. And speaking of later on show, due to the fact that I've been gone, I have a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff to get into. So today's episode is going to be the free agency essentials. This is the essential guide, the essential overview for everything that's happened within the last 2 weeks, I would say, for free agency, all the way down from the beginning of Russell Wilson trade rumors, all the way up to James White re-signing today, basically. So I'm going to try to cover everything that I can for you guys today in the free agency essentials. And just a couple pieces of news. So a lot to get into. I want to squeeze it all into half an hour. And with that, there's a lot of dynasty implications, a lot of fantasy implications going into next season with all these signings. So I'd like to do an episode right after this one. So hopefully, if you've subscribed, you got the notifications on, you're going to get 2 episodes in one day, hopefully. And I'm committed to getting these guys out tonight. I did a lot of work when I got home. It took me a couple hours to get everything together, but I think I got all my ducks in a row, and I'm ready to go now. So let's dive right into it, everybody. Let's start off with the news. So like I said, not much news today. Most of the news that I'm going to cover is going to be in my free agency essentials part of this show. So if you hear anything that I don't cover in the news, or if you hear anything that I don't cover in free agency, it's probably in there. And if you hear names that were mentioned in free agency that you kind of thought were, important, I don't really cover all of those. I don't really get into defensive players. A lot of them are, important, and offensive line people, those are important. But those are the people that I'm probably going to cover later on in the year when I'm talking about the team's dynamic going forward compared to 2020 going into 2021. So those are people I don't really want to put into here right now, because I feel like it's going to gum everything up, and I don't want to waste a bunch of time talking about those guys. So Going into the news, not much today. The number one thing that I want to cover that most people don't know that I've gotten some questions about is that there actually is no combine this year. They canceled it because of COVID and everything that was going on. So really our first look at all of these players is going to be at their pro day, which pro days are going on right now. The only difference is that in pro days in years past, a lot of the pro day, stats and everything that we look at is nowhere close to the combine. So pro day really is all about the 40 right now. And that's about it. And even the 40, it's not as trustworthy as when they come into the NFL and the combine and everything sets up. Everybody's running the same course and whatnot. People are, running different courses. They're with different judges. So there's a lot of, there's not much you can take from pro days here. So it's going to be more college film kind of, a draft this year where people are going to be really looking at just film and what they think of a player. They're not really going to have the combine to go to and hang out. They can really just do pro days. So no combine this year, just the pro days. But with the fact that there's no combine, I'd like to mention Rich Eisen every single year does a charity for St. Jude where he runs the 40. It's called Run Rich Run. So even though that there's no combine this year, I'm not sure if they are actually doing that, but I know I will be soon. So look out for my awful 40 time, as well as me trying to promote the idea of, donating to St. Jude's at this time of year, and really getting everybody into the fun of running your 40, embarrassing yourself on social media, and then doing something good for St. Jude's, who does nothing but good. So, even though it's not going to happen this year, I'd like to see some people's 40 times. So please, if you do run a 40, because you watch this show, post it on social media and hashtag Fantasy Daily for me and tag me in it so I can watch it, because that would be awesome. And I even might shout you out on the show. So no combine with that. Not many news as far as team acquisitions and stuff like that, and team talk, not much there. Washington football team says they are still looking at N'Keal Harry. They're still kind of interested in what it would take to get N'Keal Harry. Jadeveon Clowney is meeting with Cleveland today, so I'm surprised that Jadeveon Clowney has been one of those guys who's been kind of like pushed around as really not a great edge rusher, because to me, my perception is still he's a great edge rusher, so I'm surprised that he's not getting that attention from teams. But he's meeting with Cleveland. I wouldn't be surprised if he signs with Cleveland, because they haven't, done much, and Clowney hasn't gotten much interest, so signing with them is kind of a no-brainer. Plus, Cleveland's on the way up. Dynasty rankings, the Dynasty rankings that I have currently are a absolute mess. There's a lot going on. It's a lot of work for me to go in there and set up all the Dynasty rankings. So if you are somebody who goes into my Dynasty rankings and looks at them, and they're also in the description on YouTube below, if you are somebody who looks at those Dynasty rankings, they're probably not anywhere close to where I see them right now. So please take everything in there with a grain of salt. I have to move a lot of stuff around, because this year in free agency was one of the years that it was difficult to predict. I didn't expect a lot of these things to happen. I didn't expect a lot of people to go to teams that they shouldn't have gone to. And with that, let us get right into the free agency essentials part of this show, because we have many teams to cover. I tried to cover all 32 teams in this episode, and maybe if you're one of the fans of the teams, you're looking out for that. You're hoping that, your team's in here, and what did my team do? So let me get the teams that really didn't do much this year in free agency out of the way. And they could have did other things like defensive, offensive line pieces, stuff like that. But like I said, I'm not really covering that in here. It's more people who have fantasy, value or fantasy implications right now or going forward. So the teams that really didn't do much or really didn't have much for me to put on this list are the Vikings, the Browns, the Ravens, Cincinnati, Denver, Chargers, Atlanta, Carolina, San Francisco. So those are the teams that really didn't do much for me to want to change my fantasy value or talk about them so much on this show. I will definitely get into them more as time goes on, because they did make little changes that do have some, implications on fantasy, but I didn't think they were enough to put into the free agency wrap up and try to put everything into context of what happened over the last month or so. So getting right into it, the number one thing I want to say about this free agency year is that it is more clear than ever that teams do not care about fantasy football at all, because this is the worst year for free agency signings ever. And I don't know how long anybody here has been with fantasy football or been watching free agency, or if you ever dive that much into fantasy football to watch free agency and where people go, but usually it's a lot of fun. Usually it's this guy can go here and it's going to be good for this guy and it's going to be good for that, blah, 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 all that stuff. This year, I think there's maybe 2 to 3 that I'm happy with, Besides that, everything else was almost a tragedy. It was almost people losing value, people, going into situations where it could have been amazing when you heard rumors that they were going to sign to this team, and then all of a sudden they signed with that team, and you don't want any part of that team anymore. And basically every single piece of news that I get into on the next show is going to be the fantasy implications of everything that going forward from everything that's happened so far in free agency. So it's just a lot of disappointment. It really is. I've never been more disappointed in basically where everybody landed. I had high hopes for a lot of people, and basically everything that happened was just crushing dreams and crushing fantasy value, and really setting the landscape for 2021 and what you're going to have to do and what you're going to have to expect. So this is why free agency is important. This is why it's important to get ahead of it, because some people are going to go into next season thinking that Carson Wentz is still on the Eagles, and you'll have the leg up knowing that Carson Wentz is in Indy, breaking your heart. Bang. So let us get right into the teams, and I'm going to fire this off by team. So if you guys are, hoping to hear about your team and what they did, as far as fantasy football goes, I'm going to go team by team, and you just listen out for yours. So we're going to start with Seattle. Seattle didn't do too much in the free agency, but they did sign, Russell Wilson does seem to be staying. He didn't get traded. He didn't get moved. It looked a lot in the early free agency that he was going to get traded. But the teams that were interested in him have signed either backup quarterbacks or people that look like longer-term quarterbacks. So I think that Russell Wilson, the whole trade thing, all of that is done. Russell Wilson staying, which is good news for fantasy. It's good news for Seattle. It's good news for Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, because if Seattle had moved on from Russell Wilson, I would have moved Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf far down my rankings, regardless of what they came in with at quarterback. They could have drafted a number one quarterback, and I still would have moved them far down. So Russell Wilson stays. That's good news. They re-signed Chris Carson. So if you're a Chris Carson manager in Dynasty leagues, you can breathe a sigh of relief, because Chris Carson going anywhere else besides, I would say, Green Bay was going to be a bad situation. So him re-signing in Seattle is them saying that he's going to be the bell cow. He's still going to get 20-plus carries a game. So if you're a Chris Carson owner, you can breathe a sigh of relief, because now you still have a number one running back, number two running back going forward. If he plays all 16 games, that's a different story, but he is still that guy that you can roll out there every single week, knowing that you have a high upside running back one. Gerald Everett also signed with Seattle, so now they have a tight end. I expect that Gerald Everett could possibly be the tight end one over there, depending on what happens. Will Disley is still there. Greg Olsen is still there, but I don't think that they're as pass-catching talented as Gerald Everett can be. I think he runs better routes than both of them. So I think that Gerald Everett could eventually rise to the tight end one on that team. What that means for fantasy, we'll be able to see later on in the year as that progresses. But for the most part, I think Gerald Everett could easily steal the tight end one role over there. Hunter Henry going over to New England. New England had a massive splash in free agency like we expected them to. They had basically all of their team dismantled last year. It was difficult for them to get anything going. It was hard to watch anything besides having fun with Cam Newton as a Patriots fan. But New England went all in this year. They re-signed Cam Newton. A lot of Patriots fans like myself still want to see what we're going to do with quarterback. I mean, if you want to roll with Cam Newton, I'm okay with it. I get it, but we still want to see what the future holds for quarterback for them. They went out and got Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, so their tight end core is stacked. They went out and got Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, and James White has re-signed. So they're doing a lot on offense. They're probably the biggest team to move that many offensive pieces onto their team this year. So it's good to see New England try to go for it as far as fantasy value for all these guys go. We'll talk about that in the next episode. But they made a lot of big strides this year. So a lot of things from New England moving forward and basically resetting what their team's going to look like going into 2021. Houston, you have a problem. And I know that phrase is wildly overused, but oh man, what a train wreck. What a train wreck Houston is in the last 3 years. I'm sorry, if you're a Houston fan, this is wildly disappointing, no matter where you sit on Houston and wanting them to be a good team or hoping that they're going to make some moves to improve with the whole Deshaun Watson drama. But this whole thing is an absolute train wreck. I'm not going to go into politics. I don't like to do that on here. That's something that, other shows can cover. That's what you can listen to on your radio, your sports radio on the way to work for people who need filler information. But I don't like to do that here. Personally, I think Deshaun Watson's done. I think that if you have trying to be careful with what I say here. I think if you have that much going against you in, reality, and the team's trying to be a team, Deshaun Watson's done. Houston, you could have traded him before. I said it on, I think, my first episode. It was one of the biggest things I talked about, whereas if you have Deshaun Watson sitting there and he's saying, I'm done, I don't want to play anymore here, you got to move him. And their hesitation to move him, it kind of blew up in their face. And no, I don't feel bad, because that's what you get. I don't feel bad for either party. You guys both made your bed. You reap what you sow. And, be better. There's not much you can say about it. I think Deshaun Watson's done. It's not tragic. It's reality. That's what you get. And, it's time to move on from all of that. It's not a good situation. It's worse than Antonio. It's just about as bad as Antonio Brown. It's over. It's done with. I think Deshaun Watson's done. But anyway, besides that, they have signed Tyrod Taylor, and they have also signed Ryan Finley. So this leads me to believe that they were going to move on Deshaun Watson anyway, and that Tyrod and Ryan Finley were probably backup. So they were probably looking to see what they could do in the draft, maybe get one of those day 2 guys in the draft, but see what they could do, because it definitely looked, by them signing Tyrod and Ryan Finley, that they knew that Deshaun Watson was not going to be part of their plan this year, and that they were probably going to have to get something else anyway, because I don't think they go into the season with just Tyrod and Ryan Finley. I know they're hurt everywhere, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see them try to grab something else, because going into the season with just this is, that's a tank for me. So if, maybe Houston's the tank team this year, probably, but I don't think they go into the season with just that, or for a very long stay with just that. Houston also picked up Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, Randall Cobb, Dante Moncrief. They traded for Ryan Izzo. So this list goes on and on. I also want to jump back real quick to mention this website is not a sponsor of the show by any means. It's just a website that I like to use a lot, so I wanted to mention it. It's called overthecap.com. Now this is Over the Cap is reference to Over the Cap Space, and this website really likes to go into cap space and the free agency spending, the tracker. They grade the teams, they talk about contracts, stuff for the draft, and it's a really cool tool if you guys want to go in and just look at your team. It'll show you all the teams from each year, that where they were in 2020, whether they ended up in 2021, whether they were on that team and moved, or whether they were on a different team and moved to that team. So it's a really cool tool. And the reason I bring it up is because if you go look at overthecap.com and their free agency tracker, and you look at Houston, much like Jacksonville, it's just a laundry list of players that they're definitely not going to take into the season. They're just adding anybody and everybody who they've ever heard of. If they heard somebody who talked about this guy one time, they're adding them to the team, and then they're just going to figure it out before they have to cut to the 53, because their rosters are absolutely currently just stocked with anybody they could have grabbed. It was like they were grabbing the toilet paper before COVID. Both teams are grabbing whatever they can that's out there, and then they're going to worry about cutting down to the 53 later. So just to go over that list again: Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, Randall Cobb, Dante Moncrief. They traded for Ryan Izzo. They still have Brandon Cooks. They still have David Johnson. So there's just so many offensive pieces that they kept on that team that it's really hard to decide what you're going to do with that later on in the year. As far as what I think is going to happen, plug to the next show as well. But Houston's backfield is a big piece on that show for me to talk about as well. Chicago had a good year in free agency, I would say. They got Allen Robinson to sign the franchise tag, and to be honest, with Allen Robinson signing that franchise tag, he's making real good money this year on that $18 million for all the other wide receivers. He's making real good money for that. So with that, Allen Robinson gets Andy Dalton. He went over there this year. They also signed Damian Williams, who was formerly of the Kansas City Chiefs. He opted out last year, and I actually said, I think on my second show, that I don't think Damian Williams is going to get picked up by anybody. Chicago ends up picking him up. They end up getting Andy Dalton. So Andy Dalton and Nick Foles now are going to be the starting quarterbacks who are throwing to Allen Robinson. I'm hoping for Allen Robinson's value and what we've already seen, that it's going to be Nick Foles. But Andy Dalton could be the just backup guy, and then Nick Foles could be the lead of this team, and they give him a full year to see what happens. You might as well, especially if you're paying for him. Moving on to the Giants, Kenny Golladay signs a mega deal, 4 years, $72 million. He was the #1 free agent that everybody wanted to see what was going to happen to him, and here he goes. He gets his deal with the Giants for 4 years, $72 million. Giants also picked up John Ross, Kyle Rudolph, and Devontae Booker, just to name a couple offensive pieces that you've heard of in the past. Pittsburgh hasn't been didn't do much. Juju ended up going back to Pittsburgh, which was odd. He met with the Ravens and Kansas City. I guess he didn't want to go with them. Word around the tabloids, whatever you want to call it, is that they were offering Juju incentive-based contracts where Juju felt he couldn't get that on those teams, which he's not wrong. So he ended up going back to Pittsburgh, stayed true to the team, and Ben is still there. So Ben re-signed, I think Ben re-signed, I don't remember how long the contract is, but Ben is there for this year, so Pittsburgh didn't do much. The Raiders picked up Kenyon Drake, the running back from Arizona last year, so that's a big pickup for them. They also picked up John Brown, Zay Jones, an old name from Buffalo. I thought I'd throw that in there just for some fantasy nostalgia. Zay Jones, that was a 2-3 week rental back in 2018, 2019 from Buffalo. So it was weird to see his name pop up again. I haven't seen that in a while. And then just for LOLs, the Raiders re-signed Nathan Peterman. Because why? I don't know. But I think they need a third string quarterback that I don't know. I really don't know why anybody would be giving Nathan Peterman a job right now. They re-signed Nathan Peterman. And if you don't know Nathan Peterman, he's the world famous, NFL famous Buffalo quarterback who threw like 4 picks and a half. I think it was something like that. It was absolutely wild. Indy Indy picked up Carson Wentz this year. He is their new quarterback going forward. T.Y. Hilton re-signed today. Marlon Mack re-signed a little while ago. And Mo Alley Cox re-signed. So if anybody knows, I'm a big fan of Mo Alley Cox, so it's nice to see him back. And if he can be the Zach Ertz for Carson Wentz, it's going to be fantasy gold. Jets picked up Corey Davis and Tyler Kroft. I think Corey Davis is probably the biggest highlight there. Besides that, Jets didn't do much. The Titans grabbed Josh Reynolds after releasing Jonnu Smith and Corey Davis. So Josh Reynolds is now the number 2 next to A.J. Brown, which I would imagine he goes right to number 2. Tampa Bay, Brady re-signed there. Gronk stays. Not much news there. I feel like there's still a lot more to progress in Tampa Bay. I expect Leonard Fournette to re-sign there. I'm surprised he hasn't already, unless the team really doesn't care to sign him or if they're not going to pay what he's looking for. But that's that for Tampa Bay. Washington has hello Kitty, welcome to the show. Washington has signed Fitzpatrick this year, so that's a big thing for me. As you guys know, I'm a Ryan Fitzpatrick stan, so it's really nice to see Ryan Fitzpatrick get signed. I'm very excited for him with Terry McLaurin. That's going to be bonkers. There's going to be so many 60-yard bombs that Terry McLaurin reels in. And to complement Terry McLaurin, they went out and got Curtis Samuel, so that's a big signing for them as well. Curtis Samuel is the ultimate utility piece for, I think, any team, so him with Antonio Gibson is dope. Lamar Miller also signed there, not much there. I think that's just a straight-up backup signing. Buffalo gets Mitchell Trubisky on a 5th-string quarterback deal. I think he's making $2 million this year, so that's wild. Emmanuel Sanders, and that's Mitch Trubisky's job now. I'm planting my flag firmly. That's Mitch Trubisky now. He's the next Brian Hoyer, whatever you want to call it, journeyman on the bench. He's not even going to... I'd rather have Ryan Fitzpatrick than Mitch Trubisky. He's done for a starter. Buffalo also got Emmanuel Sanders and Jacob Hollister. Jacob Hollister is the one of the brothers that ended up getting picked up from New England in their first year. And then I think Jacob's the one that went to Seattle and then was released, so now he's in Buffalo. So it's cool to see Buffalo get a tight end. They also got Emmanuel Sanders, which is nice to see Emmanuel Sanders stay in the league. Miami picked up Will Fuller, Malcolm Brown, and Jacoby Brissett. So maybe we can see some Jacoby Brissett and Tua battles, but I don't think so. I think they're going to invest in Tua, and they're going to see what they got there. Philly picked up Joe Flacco. They released Alshon Jeffrey, and they re-signed Boston Scott, or they signed a tender to him. So I think actually somebody could still match the offer, but I don't believe so. I could be wrong on that. Boston Scott could be in Philly now permanently. I'm not sure if it's tendered or if it's a restricted tender. It's a difficult thing to understand in the offseason with so much coming in. The Jags had a really good free agency, I think. They picked up Marvin Jones. They have Philip Dorsett, Carlos Hyde now. So they're another team that has a laundry list of people, but I think they did really good with getting the pieces that they did. Philip Dorsett just being a compliment, Marvin Jones being, a stud. I like Marvin Jones, and to see him go to Jacksonville with the inevitability of Trevor Lawrence coming to town, that's going to be great. Arizona picks up A.J. Green and J.J. Watt. So Arizona, team that I'm very high on. I've been very high on going into the season. Last season, I'm going to be very high on them going into this season, and they're probably going to be one of my top 2 teams that I talk about a lot because Arizona is still not taken as seriously as they should be for sure. Green Bay re-signs Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is there for, I believe it was a 4-year deal. I actually want to check that Aaron Jones deal. I believe he's on a 4-year deal. Anyway, Aaron Jones re-signs. Devin Funchess re-signed. Robert Tonyan re-signed. Alan Lazard, Mercedes Lewis. So they basically retained what they had last year. They had a really good offense, so I'm not surprised that they just retained what they had already. But I still expect them to go out and get some more firepower at wide receiver and a lot more firepower at defense. So Green Bay is one of those teams that I'm watching very closely in the draft. I think last year they know that they kind of hurt themselves and did themselves a disservice in what they did. So I do expect Green Bay to go out and be a little bit more ambitious in this draft with offensive pieces and, drafting really high or trading up to get defensive pieces that they can be confident in within the first round. The Saints, not much news here, but Breeze retired this year. End of an era. Super sadness for anybody who grew up watching Drew Brees like myself. Jameis signed there, so Jameis is probably going to be the quarterback for them for the future. And fun name, just throw it in there because it's another one of those fantasy people from the blast from the past. Ty Montgomery signed with the Saints. So Ty Montgomery, if you guys remember when he was on Green Bay, he went from wide receiver to running back, and then I think he went back to wide receiver or something like that. But he was one of those players that you could put into multiple positions. So if you grabbed him off the wire, you just plugged him in wherever you needed, and he was getting the ball from Aaron Rodgers. So that was a little bit of fun. But I do remember him breaking my heart a little bit. So Detroit had a kind of a okay offseason. I'm not going to lie. When I was trashing Detroit a couple weeks ago saying that they're going to be really, really bad, I know they don't have money. They don't have cap space. They're hurting really bad. They go out and get Jared Goff. I wasn't a fan of that. They got Tyrell Williams. They got Jamal Williams. They got Brashard Perryman. Geronimo Allison is still there. I threw that in there because he opted out in 2020, but he did go to Detroit. So now he is still on Detroit, so he's still there. So as much as I did throw shade at Detroit for the pieces that they had, I don't think this is as bad as it could have been, where they didn't just, completely, poop the bed and do nothing to help them. I think that Tyrell Williams and the Brashard Perryman and the Geronimo Allison, that could be surprising with Jared Goff. So we'll see what happens, but I think I'm rising a little bit on what Jared Goff could be in Detroit. I still don't think they're a huge team, but I think that there might be some fantasy value there for us if we need it. Wink, if you need it. Waiver wire ad. Wink, wink. Waiver wire. Don't draft these people. For the love of God, don't draft these people. And don't trade for them. The Rams got Stafford. Only news there, really. They're kind of another one of those teams who spent way too much money in the past, so there's not much they can do. Kansas City got re-signed Darrell Williams. So it looks like Darrell Williams and Clyde Edwards-Helaire are the guys there still. There's not going to be much behind that. Le'Veon Bell is definitely not coming back. He's still out there doing his thing. They also got Joe Thuney, which isn't really a fantasy implication, but it's an offensive line piece that they really needed, and Joe Thuney is one of those top 5 guys where now that they have him, that's a huge addition for Patrick Mahomes and the awful, awful offensive line that we saw in Kansas City. That was fun to say, awful, awful offensive line. That's what they got, an awful, awful offensive line. And then Dallas, the only thing that they did was grab Dak, which wasn't surprising, but it was nice to see. And that's the teams. So there's the teams, really the wrap up. I wanted to give you guys everybody that had, some fantasy implications going into next year and whatnot. There's still a lot of people out there. Le'Veon Bell and James Conner come to mind for free agents still. So I think that within the next few days, those will roll into my news sections as far as people getting signed. But that's just about it for today, my friends. And with that, let us play some outro music for y'all. Outro music, same as intro. 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 Thanks for joining me on Fantasy Daily. We'll see y'all in a little